I think we're going to go ahead and get started. I know others will be joining us because they go on lunch at 12:30. So it's not afternoon yet, or is it? Yeah, it's afternoon. So the first thing I want to say, I want to thank those of you who have tuned in with us today. Um, this is for an edition of our Lunch and Learn speaker series. And of course, all of you know this is Women's History Month, where we celebrate the social, economic, cultural, and political advancements of women around the world. We also pledge to continue to raise awareness against bias and strife for equality everywhere. Now, this month, we're going to hear from several amazing women of diverse cultural backgrounds from across the Cook County Clerk's office. We're going to listen to their stories, achievements, and what has made them who they are today. And as I mentioned before, I was really pleased that when I reached out to Jolanta to do this, to be our first speaker, she agreed to do so. And Jolanta, thank you so very much for agreeing to do this. I think it's important to me, and it's important to your co-workers, that we see you every day and we see your smile on your face and doing your work and what have you. But we want to know just a little bit more about who you are. Jolanta grew up in Poland under USSR control, and she immigrated to the United States in August of 1996 to live with her mom and her brother who came before her. She obtained both her high school and college degrees in Chicago. Prior to her time at the clerk's office, she worked in various government agencies. Jolanta, thank you again for agreeing to be our first guinea pig and sharing your story with us. The floor is yours.
Thank you. First, I wanted to say I am honored to be the speaker for Women's History Month at Lunch and Learn. So serious. So thank you very much, Madam Clerk, for the opportunity and invitation. And thank you everyone that tuned in. As Madam Clerk has mentioned, I did grow up under the tail end of USSR, where everyone lived happily ever after, or that's what at least USSR wanted you to believe, that we are part of US, as a part of the USSR, we are for peace, tolerance, and other nations and all equality, which concept, it looked great only on the outside. I was born in 1983 in southwest part of Poland, on the border with Slovakia. And growing up, my grandparents raised me. They had the guardianship of me, as Madam Clerk mentioned. My mom has been in the U.S. prior to me. She immigrated to the U.S. when I was 2 years old, 1985. Couldn't bring myself, my brother, or my sister right away to the US, considering it was still communist Poland, and it took time, longer for myself and my sister than it did for my brother, partly because of the cost, partially also because of the restrictions coming from communist countries to the US at that time, and various other aspects and requirements. As for life under USSR, it wasn't all that great, but it wasn't all that bad. I was fortunate to grow up on a farm versus the city. In the city, people lived in like studio apartments, or if you were a little bit more wealthy, you had possibly a room, 1 bedroom or 2 bedrooms apartments, and all the buildings looked exactly the same, versus in more rural areas or villages or smaller towns, people had houses of their own and, of course, more room to play. As I mentioned, my childhood was happy, but it was also tough. If I had to go through many things that mother kids wouldn't even think about, or some adults don't think about, that in the 90s or 80s a child in Europe had to go through. The end of communism was characterized by empty shelves in grocery stores and shops, enormous lines to buy bare necessities, and growing unhappiness of the public in regards of not having anything in the stores. Food to come by was really hard. People were giving food stamps, families were giving food stamps, but even if you received the actual food stamps and went to the stores, you might accommodate one item in a month, maybe two. Because if you entered the store after waiting in a line, if you were lucky, first 5 or 10 in the line, and if they only had 10 bread loaves, then you got it. And if you missed out, you missed out. Mostly it was 1 or 2 items on the shelves. I remember one time I stood in the line for don't know exactly how long as a kid, for a bottle of vinegar. Not sure what my grandmother needed it for, but as I came happy with the bottle of vinegar home, it turned out that it was actually water inside. That's how it was. Survival wasn't as easy, and it wasn't as tough either. As a kid, you have a different perception of it. A lot of times, since I grew up right on the border, my grandmother and I would go and travel to Slovakia because things there were kind of easier to come by. Since we had family, we would travel there. They were able to buy things for us, keep it at their house, and then we would essentially smuggle it back in. Going there, I would have to go with money hidden somewhere on me, whether it was sewn in a special pocket of my shirt or my underwear. And coming back, we always came very, very late in the evening. Through the border, it was like a little hill. So right before the hill, we would be dropped off, and we would run up the hill, and coming down the hill where the actual border is, we would be exhausted, tired, and it would be most likely after 8 p.m. For the fact that if it was an elderly woman traveling with a child, they wouldn't search us. Because a lot of times my grandmother would bring items that the border control decided were not okay. So you had to essentially unlawfully bring them in. And I had a little backpack, so sometimes a bottle of rum for cakes or vodka, or even half a pound of sugar was put at the bottom of my backpack, and on top of it would be chips. And if, God forbid, we were to be searched, I was to cry, moan, and do everything. So they would be like, oh, it's just an old woman traveling with a child, let her go through. I remember vividly, there was one time that I forgot to do my part on cue. So my grandmother pushed me so hard that I literally, as a kid, I was maybe 4 or 5 years old, I peed myself, being so scared because of the revision. They would take you to a separate room. They wouldn't put me in a room with my grandmother. They would put me in a separate room and search me, and they would search her in a separate room. I've seen it done to other women with children. So essentially it was very, very scary as a child. Also growing up as a kid, kids here can watch cartoons till their heart's desires. I've hear stories of people talking about Bozo the Clown or Bugs Bunny. Growing up in the USSR, we had 1 to 2 channels, which were of course controlled by the Soviet Union. And the main concept of those channels were to inform about the process of the Soviet government, to entertain the citizens, but in a highly moral way and in a way that they wanted us to act and be. So when people bring up different cartoons, even like Bugs Bunny or Power Rangers, or any other show from the 80s, I have watched them, but much later, as in the 90s when we became free and TV, Western TV was allowed in Poland and shows were allowed. So I didn't get the chance to see Bugs Bunny cartoons or even shows like MASH that were years prior to 80s till 90s or even 2000, certain ones. Because they were not allowed. The only thing that was, as I mentioned, on TV were what the government allowed. And it was highly censored, highly scripted. And of course, 90%, 99% of it, Russia was amazing. Russian way of life, Russian everything was brought up to higher levels. Sometimes the feeling as a child was that Russia was more than even a god. That's how perception and they wanted you to feel. We had cartoons which was called Nupagadi Zayats, which was basically, now I realize it as an adult, a cartoon about a wolf and a bunny, but very, very similar to Bugs Bunny. Concept is almost the same, but as again, restricted with morals, ideology of Soviet communism, Russia, even sometimes Russia what it is now. At school, for example, we had teachers, even though it was literally Berlin Wall was falling, you would think automatically we became independent democratic country. It took years. Going to school, I had teachers that still had the mentality of the Russian communist regime, the Soviet regime, which we were taught every day that the life of Russia is amazing. There's nothing better than Russia. You have everything there, anything you can desire, the way that they wanted everything to work and everyone to have everything. It is best in the world, Western world, US, UK, France, Germany. They're evil. They're not for us. They are there to destroy us. Levi jeans were like hot ticket on the black market. Something like having a pop. I mean, I remember when my grandmother used to go work over the Slovakia on the border, which were basically farms that were ran and operated by the government. You had to go and work on them. Sometimes she would sneak in literally like half a cup of soda. I mean, as a kid, it was amazing, and you could have it occasionally. Oranges or bananas, I only had if my mom was able to pay, and even if they came to Poland, because sometimes even if she sent something from the US, that didn't mean that everything was delivered to us. The packages would be open, went through, and whoever was essentially bringing them picked out whatever they wanted, and the rest came in. It was a different life. Everything is controlled. At schools, the teachers, whenever there was a health day at schools, government would send in nurses and they would line us up, girls on one side, boys on the other side. And we would have a health inspection to make sure that we're healthy, our weight is where it's supposed to be. If we needed any shots, they would give it the right away. No one even really completely asked the parents of their opinion. It was government order that government is doing it. When Chernobyl exploded in 1986, we were all given iodine. No matter the age, no matter the height, we were all, it wasn't really proportioned in most times. It was mandatory, we were all given it. It's just a different concept. It's like what you've been like I'm mentioning with health. We would like to think that health is free in Soviet countries. The socialists promise everyone, like free education and free medicine. Well, what to tell you? I can understand free medicine only to talk about the set of medical services that citizen can get for free whenever he or she, has medical insurance, because the insurance covers it. But healthcare that I remember under the USSR, the buildings were horrible. Lines were for any service. You had to stand there sometimes half a day, sometimes all day. Things that were approved by the doctor for us, even drawing your blood for certain tests and something, you had to pay what is known as gratitude. It wouldn't be a bribery, it would be gratitude. And if you were able to accommodate the gratitude that the personnel, the clinic or personnel or the nurse told you, or the receptionist, you get better treatment. If not, then you had to buy everything from a syringe to the actual vaccination, pay for it, the gauze, the Band-Aid to put on your wound, everything you had to go to pharmacy and purchase yourself. That was under communism, sentences were given. And going into 2000s, since Poland became part of EU in 2004, 2005, you would think that would be completely disappeared, which isn't completely true, especially for the more rural areas. In 2015, my grandmother needed a hip replacement surgery, at which point she, having the social health care that it still exists in Europe, was put on a list to wait for her surgery. So essentially, I had to ask my manager at that time for 2 weeks of time off from work for the clerk's office to fly out back to Europe, pay my gratitude under the table, and my grandmother had surgery the very next day. That is free healthcare, free medicine. People that actually have insurance, and more are buying insurances in Europe in order to cover it. Even experience of my own, in not that far distant, in 2013, I was in Poland and I fell down the stairs and broke my foot. Going to the hospital, they told me I'm not insured. How am I not insured? I was born here, I'm a citizen. They told me you're not insured because you don't work here, you don't pay your dues monthly or bi-weekly. As you work, they pull out of your check towards the medications or Medicare. And if you don't work, you do not have it. So you have to pay out of your own pocket. Then again, coming from not a big city like Krakow, but more to the west, almost 2 hours from Krakow, southwest, I was told there's no one in the hospital to take x-rays or anything, so I would have to wait till Monday and they will put my leg in a cast. And essentially, I decided, oh no, thank you. I'm just flying back to United States with my broken foot, and that's what I did. So it isn't as pretty as it looks, as some people are talking about. Some things that I also wanted to touch upon. The other keyword for going under the system, as I mentioned, was the gratitude. That also came with connections. If you came from a family that was able to have things, like I grew up on the farm, we had a dairy farm, and you couldn't really went and sell your own milk. The milk was taken to by the government and distribute evenly. So you couldn't go and sell your milk or your produce. So we would trade in. I'll give you a glass of or a jar of milk and you'll give me this produce. So people were trading things, because even if you had money and you went to grocery stores, as I mentioned, there was nothing there. You couldn't buy anything. Everything was censored or not available. people that had connections essentially doubled everything. It was kind of like, to give you an idea, during when the pandemic started, everyone went to stores and bought everything out. And then others, as they went, there was no toilet paper or certain products. Well, to me, that was the norm growing up. We didn't have products in the stores. Stores were pretty much empty and they were operating by the government. So you were lucky what you got, and people stood in line for a loaf of bread or some meat or even butter or milk for the children or formula. Even for diapers for the children, you had to stand in a line to receive it because it wasn't just available as it is to us here. It's just coming to US was like eye-opening because everything was everywhere. And as a child, there was nothing there. As I mentioned, I would go across the border with my grandmother and I would smuggle things with her. I don't think any child should go through that, but that was the way of life. The only other thing is I did grow up on the farm, so we had our own produce. We had our own greenhouse and we were able to have certain things that others didn't. And essentially you would share it. Coming from a household that had more than others and had connections and was fortunate. There were kids that would come to my house, or my grandparents was like, oh, coming from school, make sure so-and-so comes over. And I would be always like, why they're coming over, why they're eating at our house. But when I go to their house, I'm not able to eat. I am sent home, or I'm told now I'm not allowed to eat at others' households. I have to come home. As a child, I didn't understand that those parents didn't have anything because they had nowhere to work to make the money, or they didn't have enough for 5 or 6 children. Although the food there tasted way better than it was at home, even though it was the same thing. Standard breakfast was a piece of bread with some butter and jelly that was homemade bread, homemade butter, homemade everything. We grew as much as we could. We preserved and made preserves for the whole winter. Nothing was wasted. Everything was reused. I was taught how to fix socks, how to fix your clothes by sewing or knitting or other means to stretch them out because it wasn't easy to come by. And another interesting thing is, I mean, to me, maybe to you guys, is when things got like really stretched out and worn out, and after you wash them, which we had no dryers, you would hang your clothes outside and they would dry outside during the winter and summer. When things get stretched out, you would cut it into pieces and women would essentially make rugs out of it. So everything was being repurposed, reused. Women till this day in my family have that, I guess, Soviet mentality, or maybe even post-war mentality, that, you know, you got to keep everything. Everything is fixable. Looking for cheap things and trying to stretch them out. It's the mentality of, what if I need it in the future? You never threw out anything. A pot broke down, you found a welder and you fixed it. Everything was fixable or reused in any other way. Things were just how it was. Everything was being used and reused. As I mentioned, the education system, it is essentially in a way free, but then again, it's not. We all pay taxes towards it. And during communism, the people that could get educated were basically majority of the communist party leaders or with high connections, kids. And sorry to say that, but some were not very smart, yet you have them graduating with bachelor's or doctor's degrees, and some couldn't count 2 + 2 because the joke was if you bring enough butter and pay it with gratitude, everything could be possible and made. So basically, for the gratitude, you could even in those days buy diplomas. Not so much this anymore, at least not that I'm aware of. And education at grammar school, because I had grammar school there, was different. We were taught at school that, as I've mentioned, the Western world is evil. US is massively evil. They want to come and capture us and enslave us, and essentially that's what we were being taught at school. But as you went home, it was a whole nother history lesson of what's right and what's not, and not to essentially listen to what in school everything was being taught to us, especially the part of when Russia was being brought up to a whole nother level of, excitement and the right way. So everything was censored. Everything was essentially, you were in a way brainwashed, which is different. As I've mentioned, I came to US in 1996. So about 6 years after, 7 years, the Berlin Wall fell. My childhood was in Europe. My first day in US after traveling by myself on a plane, which was scary. I cried the whole time. I'm going to a world that I have no idea. My grandparents told me one thing, school taught me something else. So as a kid, you have these different ideas, different things that you heard. Landing in the US at O'Hare Airport, my luggage got destroyed, so I had to pick up my very few belongings that I brought with me in the luggage all over the airport. Someone took my hands and processed them, took fingerprints, even though they took all that in Europe, because coming here, I had to go through various tests, various exams to ensure that I don't have diseases, or I don't know exactly what they were looking for. They did x-rays and all sorts of things that you had to go through medical examination to come here. And they took fingerprints back home in Europe. So as a kid, I was like, why are you sticking this black thing again on me? But took pictures and everything. So essentially, after they did all that, they just let me out. And coming through those big doors, I knew how my mom looks. The first time that I have recollection of her, I was 9 years old. She came for my communion after the communists fell in 92. So she was waiting for me. She picked me up. It was so late because it was raining and the plane was late that I just got home, went to sleep. The very next day, we went to the grocery store. Let me tell you, as I mentioned, I've never seen so much stuff on shelves. My jaw could not, really, I could not close it. My eyes were like, wow, bananas. And there's not just more than one. You had skids of everything, of fruit and shelves of pop, and I mean, literally everything. I was asked what I would like to pick up, what do I like to eat. I walked around the stores and honestly, I didn't pick up anything because I didn't know what to choose. Then, even when things were changing in Europe and things were on the shelves, the prices are so high. The tax on food is over 20%. That when we go to store, we don't buy pounds of this and pounds of that. You see people buying a few slices of that and few slices of that and putting it on a plate. If someone comes in here, we spend money on food. And I was brought here, everything was available. Everything I could ask for or not even ask for was everywhere. Clothes wise, in Europe, we're not allowed to touch things. You can't just take things off the shelf and try it on. You have to ask and you're assisted and you go in the back and you try things on. You can't just open a jar of something and smell it to see if the lotion is awesome. It's kind of changing, but it's still restricted as here. I mean, I was like, wow, they're opening everything. They're like, oh my, I was like, oh my God, that woman opened chips and she's just eating it. It was shocking. It wasn't the world that I was told it was. I was also kind of in grammar school, I was put down and essentially beaten at school because my mother was in the US. So I was told nonstop that the Western ideology and the promise that I may go there should be knocked out of me, because if I do go there, I'll be nothing but cleaning toilets for other people and not do anything. So essentially, when I came here, and about week and half, started the last 2 years of my grammar school. And I was introduced to my homeroom teacher, Jacqueline Chapman. And she essentially told me who Jolanta Adams is, because pronouncing my name, she was having some hard time not speaking Polish. She decided that from that day on, she'll just call me Jolanta Adams, and played the music for me, which I to this day love, and later on gave me a CD. My first day of school in the US, it was a hard one. I, like my teacher, felt warm and cozy with her. To this day, I keep in touch with my homeroom teacher, my very first teacher in the US, but I essentially took a seat, not understanding a word of English, besides, very good ones, and looked out the window and spent the day crying and tried to hide my tears from everyone else. Going to a lunchroom, we do not get lunches in Europe. So that was a different thing. Then books were given to me. I was like, what's this? Why am I supposed to take it? What's a locker? We don't have that in Europe. You have to buy your own books, whether you're in kindergarten or college. The parent buys the books for the kids, from pen to pencil to notebooks to essentially any book that is needed. The government doesn't provide it, despite the fact that we might not pay as high as property taxes as some claim we do in the US, but there's other drawbacks. So, with time, it was kind of like, wow, the West world isn't as awful as Russia taught me. I got free books. Everyone's super nice to me. And with time, I've learned English day by day, a few more words, some pronunciation at the beginning were very, very funny. And I remember one of my friends, we called her Fletch, would take my hand and show me where the bathroom is, where the lunchroom is. And my very first game I ever attended in the US was Bulls game. And I still like to watch Bulls from time to time, which, by the way, is my mother's favorite thing to watch. We had a contest, something had to do with yogurts, Dannon yogurts, and we were doing a presentation, and we were put in groups, and I brought a lot of different magazines, European magazines, cut things out, and me and my fellow classmates won. So we got to go for free through some programs, City of Chicago program, to the Bulls game with my teacher, and that was super fun. As I started, it was about 6 months here, and my English wasn't perfect. At the Bulls game, I asked for Pepsi. I didn't know it's called soda. So things like that, we're learning as I go. But bringing into what is going on in the world today, as a lot of you see refugees coming, whether it's to Europe or any countries, even the refugees coming to the US, children or adults. It isn't easy. It's a different world. Americans are more laid back, or maybe not laid back. Everyone experiences differently. But what I was told with US was or is to people that were shaping my upbringing in grammar school, it wasn't not even close. Nothing that communist or USSR was teaching me about the US came close. I'm not obviously not cleaning houses or scrubbing the bathroom floors with the toothbrush, as one of my teachers always told me. That's all I'm gonna be doing with my mother. I don't have shame in it, and I'm not ashamed of it. As I came to the US, there was time that I did clean houses to put myself through education and getting myself, my brother or my sister educated was a massive priority of my family. So we got all a schooling that you graduate to grammar school, you go to high school, you can live in a house for free, and you go to college, you can go live for free. Otherwise, you gotta go and get a job. But things didn't come easy. Everything had to be earned. Even with the language barriers, as you study certain things in the US English, certain things we do or how we taught in Europe, how we do math are different. It's a whole different experience. Like I mentioned with Russia taking over the Ukraine right now, all those refugees, in a sense, I can relate what they're fearing, because that brought fears not only to me, but to my family back home. We are all fearing of going back to be taught what we are allowed to think, what we not allowed to think, that you can't be creative or you can be creative. Under Western world, you can be creative. You can essentially as long as you work hard, and you have the opportunities to become who you want to be. And under USSR, you don't. You're either a school teacher, a factory worker, or you have connections and you get things. We don't call it, you have connections and you can pay with gratitude for things, because we don't call it bribery, it's gratitude. You can achieve things in Europe too. With gratitude, you would go to government facilities in Europe, you would bring some gratitude with you, and things would be done quicker, especially like with education and doctor's offices. Gratitude in Europe went during those times long way. So it's a different world. It has changed a lot, but essentially also didn't. Things are different. So if anyone has any questions?
Okay, that was a lot. That was a whole lot, Jolanta. And thank you for sharing your story. One thing I'd like to know, you mentioned something about iodine. What I didn't understand.
So when Chernobyl, the nuclear plant exploded in 1986, the anecdote to make sure that we don't get sick, the government, USSR government, distributed iodine to all of us.
So could you tell me how old you were when you traveled by yourself?
I was 13. I just turned 13 when I came to US. I turned 13 in May and I came in August of 96 to US.
13 years old, traveling by yourself, going to a new country. That's amazing. I mean, I remember when I took my first plane ride, and I'm trying to think, I think I was about 12, but I lived in the United States. My parents, were on one end, my grandparents were on the other end, and I traveled with a sibling. So I cannot imagine you came all the way across the water and not knowing what you expected. You are a brave little girl. That's all I got to say about that.
Well, not knowing what I expected, plus I really didn't know my mom. My mom left when I was 2 years old. She,
Oh,
in 1982, my mom became a widow with 2 children and pregnant with me.
wow.
So in my family, I am true meaning of a miracle baby because my father and her were in a massive ambulance accident, and my father passed away, and she was in a coma for 2 weeks and blind, face blind for about 2 to 3 weeks. During the time when they were trying to recover her, they did not realize that she was pregnant with me.
Oh my, so you're a miracle baby on top of all of that.
Yes.
That's pretty amazing. I don't know if any of your coworkers may have a question or a comment, but now would be the time. We will unmute you. Let's see here. Somebody asked, what did you see in America that you realized, I don't see the rest of, that your country was totally wrong about?
Basically, we were told that, Europeans are enslaved here. I didn't see that. I didn't see the treatment of us badly versus others. I was also told that I won't be respected, that there's no opportunities, that all I can do is come here and clean houses or work in a factory, that I will not be allowed to get myself educated or achieve anything because it's not allowed unless you were born here.
And what did you find to be the truth?
Completely different. Growing there and going to school there, I was somewhat held back and not allowed to go with my full potential. At times I even gave up on it because it didn't matter whether I learned a subject or knew everything, every single answer perfectly. For the test, I wasn't allowed to be given more than a C because my mom and my family, my mom's family was in the United States, so they had to ensure to hold me back. And when I came here, when you did good on a test, my teacher put a smiley face on me, on my test, even though at the beginning, all I had to write, point that this is dog and this is cat, because I didn't know English. I had to learn it here. I was like, wow. I asked her with the dictionary, what did I do wrong? And she's like, you did everything perfect. That was just, you. And I was like, oh, really? Wow. And I wasn't expecting that because it wasn't in Europe. If you did something wrong, they pull out a ruler and hit you with it. Or book was flying and you got essentially hit because you didn't give the right answers.
Wow.
Teachers under the instructions of the USSR were very, very strict, and you were not allowed to be creative.
So since you've been in the States, tell us about how you've achieved, you set goals and you achieved those goals. Tell me about that. What goals? One goal you had to have, you had to learn English. And I know English is not a terribly great language to have to learn. I mean, it's difficult, but you had to learn the language first. I know you had to learn customs as well. And so you were here with what? Who were you here with?
So when I came to US, my mom already was here. My grandfather's sister and essentially my mom's majority of her family was in the US. So I had some close knit family that I've never met prior to coming here, which I met when I came here. But there was a strict rule at home. At the beginning, when I did not understand, I could speak Polish or Slavic, but right away there were books taken out of library, and each night I had to try to learn the alphabet and read for an hour to 2 hours. And essentially I was told at home here that this is America, you have to learn American ways, and either that or get the hell out, go back.
Somebody
Literally.
told me that. Shame on them.
I can understand because my grandfather here was strict, and he ensured that we get accustomed and certain ideologies of the communist ways are changed in our minds to open and see that we have opportunities. Um, it was same said to my brother or my sister. We're all strive to be educated and achieve something, help others.
So Christine is asking, was it the original plan for you to join your mom once she was settled in America, or were you supposed to stay with your grandparents? What was the plan?
The plan was for us to come here, but under USSR was harder. My father worked for PACE, which is essentially like a PACE bus, which was government. So kind of everyone knew who I was as a child, and they always referred to me as child postmortem. In translation,
Oh, goodness.
it doesn't sound as great. Basically, I was the miracle child that survived. A lot of people knew my father because he drove PACE bus and knew a lot of people. So he passed away. I lived. A lot of them knew who I was. So essentially, I think part of it, it's very expensive to come here now, and it was very expensive there. So it was the money aspects. Then we were still under USSR. To bring us here, it took time. A lot of lawyers involved. Those few times that we were supposed to come, but papers didn't come through. Or in Poland, they were saying they haven't received them, or they stalled when we received them at home.
So how'd your mother get out of the USSR? Were people just leave?
Basically, my mom left because she was 27 years old and she became a widow with 3 children.
No, but I mean, how'd she get out? Were you allowed to just leave and go to wherever you wanted to go, or did they try to detain her?
Well, no, she came to visit her, family here for a trip.
Okay,
and then it was citizenship transferred to her.
Okay.
So and then everyone always knew that someday most likely we will join her, and the USSR people that worked for the government at that time, the regime, in a sense, knew that, so they treated us extra special.
Deandra asks a question: are there any customs or traditions from your culture that you honor or practice here in the United States from Poland? I know one.
I bring pączki all the time.
Yes.
I bring them on Thursday because we have Fat Thursday. We start Mardi Gras earlier, and of course Tuesday. I mean, gotta share them with everyone. They're yummy. Other things that we do, we have Christmas Eve. We share wafer, like breaking a bread, and we wish everyone a Merry Christmas. We still do that. Some cultural things of mine are Polish, as some are more Slavic. The region that I grew up on, there wasn't always part of Poland. So when my grandparents were born, it was Czechoslovakia or Austrian-Hungarian Empire. My great-grandfather served in Austro-Hungarian Empire's army, and he essentially was in the US twice prior to World War I. And his brother came here and stayed. So my family has been on both ends. I've had uncles in the US that fought during World War II, and I had family, grandparents and uncles in Europe fighting World War II.
Jolanta, I want to thank you once again for sharing your story with us. And I think we have a bird's eye view of what life was for you. And we're glad that you're here in the United States and a part of our family, our work family. And I think we're going to hug you a little closer, just knowing what you've gone through and that you're here. You're an overcomer. And I have a lot of respect for people who have gone through a lot to get to where they are. And you're one of my people and one of our women for this month that we are honoring. So again, thank you so very much for sharing. And I'm going to sign off now because I think we're right at 1:24. I know some folks have to get off because they're at lunch, but again, my warmest personal regards and thanks.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk, for having me, and thank you to all the women and everything that we overcame.
Great job, Jolanta.
Thank you. Can I sign up now?
Yes, great job, Jolanta.
So
Have a
how
great
do
day.
you say goodbye in Polish? Say
Dobranoc.
goodbye in Polish.
Do widzenia.
Do widzenia.
Yes.
Is that right? Did I say it right?
Yep.
Do
Very
widzenia?
close. Do
Okay,
widzenia.
to all of you, do widzenia.
Do widzenia.